Men with dopamine addiction often become insecure, nice guys.
No, they don't.
Dopamine addiction leads me to seek quick approval, chase instant gratification, and become easily distracted as a way to avoid difficult emotions.
No, it doesn't. And you want to know why? Come here. Because dopamine addiction isn't a real thing, which means you definitely can't do this.
Tried the dopamine detox challenge for beginners, never thinking I could restore my energy and get rid of stress.
Because you want to know what would happen if you actually detox from dopamine? You would die. So let's talk about how dopamine and addiction are related and what is and is not real science. Dopamine is one of the many neurotransmitters in your brain. Those are chemicals that neurons use to communicate with each other. And it so happens that some of the pathways in your brain that are responsible for helping you figure out what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to use the neurotransmitter dopamine to communicate with each other. And we find that, for example, in things like ADHD, if we give you medications that enhance the amount of total dopamine in your brain, you are better able to connect the dots, to connect between the action and its importance or its reward level. And your overall dopamine levels don't increase or decrease when you change between those different activities. For example, sitting here on social media or going into another room and sitting quietly. And by the way, don't just take my word for it. Take the word of Dr. Cameron Seppa over at UCSF, because he's the one who came up with the idea of, quote, the dopamine fast, end quote. In his words, it makes for a catchy title. The title's not to be taken literally, end quote, in his interview with the New York Times. Now, why is this important? Because people who take dopamine fasts are really engaging in fasting from behaviors that they want to change, and that part is great. But we start running into a problem with unhealthy versions, especially notably over in Silicon Valley, where people are doing these increasingly intense fasts with the idea that if I abstain from activating dopamine in my brain, then things will be more pleasurable when I reactivate that dopamine later. And that kind of intense deprivation can actually lead people to re-engage in behaviors even more intensely and lead to maladaptive behaviors similar to things like eating disorders. So look, you want to fast from social media because you want to focus on other things that you deem are more important? Great. But if you think that you're somehow decreasing the amount of dopamine in your brain so that later it can spike and be more powerful, that's pseudoscientific and not true.